I never meant to love him. The thought alone was a betrayal, a splinter driven deep into the heart of the life I had vowed to uphold. But the heart, I learned, is a reckless, unyielding thing, deaf to reason, blind to the boundaries of duty. It was in the humid summer of my 27th year, in the quiet town of Hudson, New York, that I first felt the stirrings of something forbidden, something that would unravel me, thread by thread, until I was no longer certain of the woman I saw in the mirror. It was a love that should never have been, yet it became the pulse beneath my days, the shadow that followed me through the years. My name is Emily, and I was married to Daniel, a man whose kindness was as constant as the Hudson River's flow, steady and unassuming, but whose presence often felt like a shadow I lived beneath. We had been married for 3 years, our union born of a love that was genuine but tempered by the pragmatism of shared dreams, a modest home, a family, a life woven into the fabric of our small town. I cared for him deeply, in the way one cares for a familiar path, safe, reliable, but not the kind that sets your soul ablaze. Our life was a rhythm of routine, his days at the accounting firm, crunching numbers in a fluorescent-lit office, my hours managing our little bookstore on Warren Street, surrounded by the musty scent of paper and ink, and the occasional family gatherings where I played the role of the devoted wife, smiling through the weight of expectations. It was at one such gathering, 2 years into our marriage, that I met Ethan. Ethan was Daniel's younger brother, 5 years my junior, a college student with eyes that carried dreams too vast for the narrow streets of Hudson. He was different from Daniel. Where my husband was calm, measured, and predictable, Ethan was a spark, a restless energy that seemed to hum beneath his skin, as if he were always on the verge of breaking free. The first time we met, he arrived late to a family barbecue in our backyard, his dark hair tousled from the drive, his smile sheepish but warm, like sunlight piercing a storm cloud. I remember the way his gaze lingered on me as he apologized for his tardiness, his voice low and earnest, a fleeting moment that felt like a question neither of us dared to answer. My cheeks burned, and I blamed the summer heat, the smoke from the grill curling lazily into the air, anything but the truth stirring in my chest. But the seed was planted, small and insidious, in the quiet soil of my loneliness. Our interactions were innocent at first, or so I convinced myself. Ethan would drop by our house on weekends, bringing textbooks for his engineering courses or tools borrowed from Daniel's shed, his presence filling our Victorian home with a lightness I hadn't realized I craved. I would brew coffee, and we would sit at the kitchen table, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and the distant hum of crickets beyond the open windows. He would talk about his studies, his plans to travel the world, Berlin, Tokyo, places that felt like fairy tales in our small town life. His voice was alive with a passion that made my chest ache, a reminder of the dreams I had once harbored, dreams of writing novels, of seeing the world before I traded them for the stability of marriage and routine. I listened, captivated, my hands wrapped around my mug to keep them from trembling, my eyes tracing the lines of his face when I thought he wouldn't notice. There was nothing improper in those moments, nothing to confess, yet in the silences between his words, I felt a pull, a current drawing me toward him that I couldn't name, like a tide I was powerless to resist. The guilt came later, creeping in like damp rot in the walls of my conscience. It started with dreams, vivid, shameful dreams, where Ethan's hand brushed mine, where his breath was warm against my ear, where his eyes held mine with an intensity that made my heart stutter. I would wake with my pulse racing, Daniel's steady breathing beside me a reminder of the vows I had made in a church filled with roses and promises. I told myself it was nothing, a fleeting fancy, a trick of the mind born of too many quiet evenings alone with my thoughts. But the more I saw Ethan, the harder it was to lie. His laughter, sharp and unguarded, pierced the monotony of my days like a blade. His quick glances, stolen when he thought I wasn't looking, set my skin alight, a warmth that lingered long after he was gone. The way he lingered when he said goodbye, his hand hovering near the doorknob, as if reluctant to leave, fed a fire I was desperate to smother. I began to notice the smallest things, the curve of his jaw, shadowed by the faintest stubble, the way his fingers moved when he sketched in his notebook, quick and precise, as if coaxing life from the page, the faint scar above eyebrow from a childhood fall, a mark I longed to trace with a trembling hand. Each detail was a theft, a secret I hoarded in the dark corners of my heart, where no one could see the traitor I was becoming. I tried to distance myself, to build a wall between us before the cracks in my resolve grew too wide. I made excuses when Ethan came by, burying myself in inventory at the bookstore, rearranging shelves until my hands ached, or running errands in town. The cobblestone streets of Hudson, a blur beneath my hurried steps. I avoided his calls, ignored the messages he left with Daniel, each one a pebble in the growing pile of my guilt. But Daniel, oblivious to the storm raging within me, encouraged his brother's visits, his face lighting up at the mention of Ethan's name. "He looks up to you," he would say, his voice warm with pride as he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You're like the sister he never had." The words were a blade, twisting in my gut, slicing through the fragile defenses I had built. A sister. That was all I was meant to be, all I could ever be. Yet, when Ethan's eyes met mine, over a dinner table, laden with casserole, in the flicker of a bonfire, at a family gathering, during a fleeting moment in the bookstore when he stopped by to browse, there was no sisterly affection in them. There was something else, something raw, unspoken, and dangerous, a mirror to the longing I buried deeper with every passing day. The longing grew, insidious and unrelenting, weaving itself into the fabric of my days. I found myself seeking him out in small, shameful ways. I lingered at the bookstore's front window, hoping to catch a glimpse of his pickup truck rumbling down Warren Street. I kept a sketch he had left behind, a half-finished drawing of the Hudson River, tucked between the pages of a novel I never finished. I replayed our conversations in my mind, dissecting his words for hidden meanings, for any sign that he felt the same pull I did. Each act was a betrayal, a step further from the woman I had promised to be. I began to avoid mirrors, afraid of the stranger staring back at me, her eyes heavy with secrets she could never confess. The summer of that fateful year brought everything to a head, like a storm that had been gathering for months, its clouds heavy with unspoken truths. Daniel was called away for a week-long conference in Albany, leaving me alone in our house, a 2-story Victorian with creaking floors and windows that rattled in the wind. The solitude was both a relief and a torment, the silence amplifying the thoughts I had tried so hard to silence. I spent my days at the bookstore, my nights pacing the house, the weight of my longing a stone in my chest. Ethan, as if drawn by some cruel fate, showed up one evening, his pickup truck parked crookedly in the driveway, its headlights cutting through the dusk like a beacon. He said he needed to borrow a book, but his hands were empty, his excuse as flimsy as the summer breeze that carried the scent of lilacs through the open door. I let him in, my pulse pounding, my mind screaming for me to turn him away, to lock the door and run from the danger he represented. But my feet stayed rooted, my heart a traitor to my will. We sat in the living room, the air heavy with humidity and something far more oppressive, the old ceiling fan clicking above us in a futile attempt to stir the stillness. The silence between us was a living thing, pulsing with all we couldn't say, thick with the weight of our unspoken truths. I sat on the couch, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, while Ethan stood by the window, his silhouette framed against the fading light. The distance between us was a chasm, yet it felt like nothing at all, as if the air itself conspired to pull us closer. I don't know how it happened, how the space between us shrank, how our hands found each other in the dim light of a single lamp. His touch was tentative at first, a question, his fingers brushing mine with a hesitation that mirrored my own, as if he, too, knew the line we were crossing. But when I didn't pull away, it became a confession, a surrender to the current we had both fought for so long. His fingers were warm, rough from his part-time job at a local garage, and they sent a shiver through me that I couldn't suppress. For a moment, I let myself feel it, the longing, the ache, the reckless joy of being seen, of being wanted in a way that made my blood sing. His breath hitched, and I felt the heat of his gaze. Though I couldn't meet his eyes, time slowed, the world narrowing to the point where our hands met, a fragile bridge between duty and desire. But then reality crashed in, cold and unforgiving, like a wave breaking over me, dragging me back to the shore of my obligations. I tore my hand away, my breath ragged, my voice barely a whisper, as I told him to leave. The word was a wound, cutting us both, but it was all I could manage. He didn't argue. He stood, his face a mask of anguish, his eyes glistening with something I couldn't bear to name. Regret, longing, or perhaps the same shame that clawed at me. He walked out into the night, the screen door slamming shut behind him, the sound echoing in the hollow of my chest like a gunshot. I sat there for hours, my body trembling, my mind a battlefield of desire and duty. I hated him for stirring this in me, for making me feel alive in a way I hadn't known I could, for showing me a version of myself I could never embrace. I hated myself for letting it grow, for wanting something I had no right to claim. But most of all, I hated the truth. I loved him, not in the quiet, steady way I loved Daniel, but in a way that burned, that consumed, that made me feel both whole and damned in the same breath. Ethan didn't come back after that night. He sent a brief message through Daniel, saying he was swamped with schoolwork, but I knew the truth. He was running from the same fire I was, fleeing the wreckage of what we had almost let ourselves become. The weeks that followed were a blur of guilt and longing, each day a struggle to bury the memory of his touch, the weight of his gaze. I threw myself into my work at the bookstore, arranging shelves until my hands ached, dusting spines until my lungs burned, anything to keep my mind numb. But the scent of coffee, the sound of a pickup truck rumbling down the street, the sight of a sketchbook left open on a customer's table, each was a reminder, a wound that refused to heal. I began to avoid the kitchen table where we had sat, the living room where our hands had met, as if the house itself were a map of my betrayal. The month stretched into a year, and I saw Ethan only once more, at a family Thanksgiving at Daniel's parents' house. The air was crisp with autumn, the table laden with turkey, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie. But the warmth of the gathering couldn't reach me. Ethan was quieter now, his spark dimmed, his laughter a shadow of what it had been. He sat across from me, his eyes fixed on his plate, avoiding mine with a deliberation that cut deeper than any words. I wanted to scream, to beg him to look at me, to tell him I was sorry, that I was drowning without him. I wanted to confess that I carried him in every quiet moment, that his absence was a weight I couldn't shake, that I woke each morning with his name on my lips, unspoken but heavy. But I stayed silent, my role as Daniel's wife a chain I couldn't break, my smile a mask I wore for the sake of the family around us. When he left early, citing a study group, I watched him go, his figure disappearing into the November dusk, my heart a tangle of regret and relief. The years have passed slowly, each one a layer of sediment over the wound, burying it but never erasing it. Ethan moved to Brooklyn, chasing his dreams, or perhaps escaping our ghosts. I heard through Daniel that he works as an engineer now, designing bridges or buildings, something that takes him far from Hudson's quiet streets. He sends postcards sometimes, brief notes about his life in the city, but they are addressed to Daniel, never to me. I read them when Daniel leaves them on the counter, my fingers tracing the loops of Ethan's handwriting, searching for something I know I'll never find. I remain with Daniel, our life a steady hum of routine, unchanged on the surface. Mornings at the bookstore, evenings by the fireplace, weekends with family. Daniel is as kind as ever, his love a constant I don't deserve, his trust a mirror to my deceit. We have a daughter now, Clara, a bright-eyed girl of 5 whose laughter fills the house and whose innocence makes my guilt sharper. I am a good mother, or so I tell myself, pouring my love into her bedtime stories, her finger-painted masterpieces, her endless questions about the world. But there are moments when I catch myself staring at her, wondering if she carries some echo of the passion I buried, some trace of the woman I might have been. Clara's birth was a tether binding me to Daniel, to the life I chose, but it also deepened the ache, a reminder of the love I could never claim. I wonder sometimes if Ethan knows about her, if he imagines her face, if he feels the same pang of loss for a life we never dared to dream. The bookstore has become my refuge, its shelves a labyrinth where I can lose myself. I spend hours there, surrounded by stories of love and loss, of choices made and unmade. I read novels I once dreamed of writing, their pages a mirror to my own unspoken story. I keep Ethan's sketch, the one of the Hudson River, hidden in a locked drawer beneath the counter, a relic I can't bear to destroy. On quiet afternoons, when the shop is empty and the sunlight slants through the windows, I take it out, my fingers brushing the pencil lines, as if I could summon him back through the force of my longing. But he is gone, a ghost in a city I'll never know, and I am here, tethered to a life that is both my comfort and my cage. Sometimes, late at night, when Daniel sleeps and Clara dreams, I sit by the window, staring out at the river that cuts through our town. The water is dark, its surface rippling with secrets it will never tell. Its current a reminder of the forces that pull us where we cannot go. I think of Ethan, of the boy who made me feel alive, of the man he's become, a stranger now in a world of steel and glass. I wonder if he thinks of me, if he carries the same ache, the same questions, the same memories of a summer night when we stood on the edge of something vast and terrifying. I wonder if he dreams of my hand in his, if he wakes with the same hollow ache that haunts my mornings. I tell myself it was a mistake, a fleeting madness, born of loneliness and youth, a chapter I closed long ago. Yet, in the quiet moments, when the world is still and my heart betrays me, I wonder if it was the truest thing I ever felt. And so I live, caught between the life I have and the one I can never claim, a woman divided by her own heart. The river flows on, indifferent to my secrets, and I carry them still. The love I buried, the shame I can't outrun, the memory of a touch that lingers like a bruise. I am Emily, wife, mother, keeper of a bookstore and a forbidden truth. And in the spaces between who I am and who I might have been, Ethan remains, a ghost I cannot exorcise, a love I cannot speak, a weight I will carry until the river runs dry.